Welcome to the channel and my review of Razer's Raiju Tournament Edition controller for PlayStation 4 and PC. PC compatibility is from Windows 7 upwards. Now this controller caught my eye way back in August 2018, and in December 2018 I decided to make a purchase so I could do a review for the channel and also improve, hopefully, my gaming experience on PlayStation 4. Now, one of the key things for me with this controller is its form factor. The PlayStation 4 generic controller I find is way too small for me. I just find it very uncomfortable to play with, and as a result, when I saw this controller I thought, great, finally a controller that is of a decent form factor, e.g. a respectable size for me to hold and be able to control comfortably. So I'm going to start a review, as I do all of my reviews, with a bit of an unbox. Now, initial perception based on the packaging is that it's very good, really high quality package as you would expect from a Razer product. Opening up, we've got a really nice foam bed inside for our controller, so it's well protected during shipping. Weight wise, this feels actually really good. It feels probably not quite as heavy as Xbox One Elite controller, but probably twice the weight, or maybe even a bit more than twice the weight of a standard PS4 controller, which is another reason I wanted this controller. It feels like I'm holding something as opposed to that PS4 controller that feels ridiculously light. Analogs initially feel quite kind of nice, obviously without play. They do unfortunately have that 4-point D-pad there for obviously fighting games. That's not going to be so great, and that was obviously one of my complaints about the Razer Wolverine, or one of my cons about the Razer Wolverine controller for Xbox. So we'll see how that goes. I'll do some testing with it, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to get the same result. I don't know about you, but I just generally find that analogs don't work as well. The pad in the center of the controller, it's got a nice Razer emblem on it, actually feels a bit looser than the generic pad. The buttons on the controller, so the triangle, circle, X, square buttons, they feel a little bit more responsive, so not too bad. Quite like the feel of those. I don't think there's a massive amount in it between a standard controller and this, but I think there's just that little bit more positive feel from the buttons on this controller. So then we've got our remappables, of which there are 4 remappable buttons. 2 directly next to the handles for the controller, and 2 on the very front of the controller. And they feel quite nice to push in, quite responsive. You can tell you've actually hit them. I do like the design of the controller in general. I think it's quite a nice looking controller, this. It's also got very tight mold, so you can't, the seams are all nice and close, and it looks extremely tidy. We've got a connection there for the USB charge cable, which I'll get to in a few seconds. But in general, it is pretty nice controller. Oh, tap the button there. We're syncing now. Not going to get anywhere yet. PS4 has not been set up. So handle wise, we've got some very nice shallow grips on either side of the controller. These actually feel really nice, really comfortable to play with. The holding position feels okay. It is actually slightly different, obviously, from some controllers where the analogs are kind of both in the middle at the bottom. This one's obviously in the top right, left of the corner of the controller, but it feels okay, based on first initial impressions. And we've got our start button, our back button, our option button. Everything's there. The button in the middle at the bottom is for pairing this device with your phone. So you press and hold that to pair with a phone. But this pad in the middle, normally we're used to a speaker on the PlayStation 4 controller. You do not get speaker functionality with the Razer Raiju. So your controller as a Razer Raiju has no speaker in it, so you will lose speaker functionality by switching to this controller from a generic PS4 controller. The Razer Raiju supports hair triggers, so underneath the controller we've got these 2 sliders here. If we move these outwards, we're switching the hair trigger feature on, and that will cause the L1, R1 trigger buttons to lock in or make contact sooner, hence decreasing the time it takes to fire. This is the trigger all the way in without hair trigger support. And then if we switch hair trigger back on, just so you can see the difference, you're only traveling about a third of the normal distance you would travel to enable that hair trigger. So that will give you faster shooting during FPS games, which I've confirmed in the likes of Apex, Call of Duty Black Ops and such. So triggers themselves feel quite nice, as do the other full remappable buttons. The sliders on the back of the controller for enabling hair trigger are actually very positive. They feel quite firm, they lock into place nicely. The thing I didn't notice on my Wolverine controller until recently is that they float on the Wolverine controller. They're not as solid as they are on this Raiju. So underneath the Raiju we have 3 switch options right in the middle there. Basically it enables PlayStation 4 Bluetooth, USB or PC Bluetooth. In order to connect your PlayStation 4 console with this controller, you simply hold in the PlayStation button for 2 seconds. You'll see the controller starts to blink very quickly, and when you see that, you can then go to your settings in your PlayStation 4 devices, Bluetooth devices, and choose the Raiju from the list of available devices to add to support on the console. I found that very easy. I did see a lot of messages and forums on product reviews for this where people complained about that. I had no issues connecting either of the 2 controllers I had. Now, one thing that is very important to understand about this controller, in Bluetooth mode you do not get any sound through the jack on the controller. So if you wanted to use a headset with this controller, you cannot do it via using the Bluetooth switch option on this controller. You will get no sound from the audio jack. The USB supported switch is where you will get sound. Now here we've got the jack, and just above the jack we have the pairing device button for the controller, which you'll use to pair this controller with either your iOS mobile phone or your Android mobile phone. But going back to those switches, the USB switch is how you must charge the controller. So when you're actually cabling the controller to a console or to your PC, you must have it set to USB in order to charge it. If it's not set to USB, it won't charge the controller. That's my experience. I actually tested it 4 times on the PlayStation 4 with the controller set to Bluetooth and cabled, so that I could try and take benefit of maybe using the audio jack. It doesn't work. You literally can only use the audio jack when that switch is in the USB position. So no wireless support for audio sound through a jack and a headset, which is a little disappointing. The PC setting is required in order to upgrade the controller. I had it set to USB thinking I could do the upgrade that way. It didn't see the controller at all. So PC support period over Bluetooth and over wired seems to need the PC setting. So you have to actually move the switch to the PC setting to get that to work as well. Now I updated both of the controllers that I had because I'd read about drift issues on the analog sticks for this controller, and hence I wanted to make sure I was at the latest version of firmware when I was testing for these types of problems. Now I did do a whole bunch of testing, a variety of different games. I've easily spent 100+ hours testing these controllers, both controllers, and one of the things I found was that as a Bluetooth controller, obviously like I said, you get no sound through your headset, which is a little bit annoying. But the other thing that I also found, this is that USB cable you get with the controller. Really nice high quality USB cable this isn't breaking anytime soon, and it also gives a really firm connection into the controller. You've also got a nice tidy kind of rubber ring there just to tie the thing together when it's not in use. Now going back to using the controller over Bluetooth, I found it worked perfectly. I didn't have hardly any issues. However, I did unfortunately see on 1 or 2 occasions, and it was very, very random, some drift issues. So I'd be trying to aim, for instance, in a shoot 'em up game like Apex, and the controller would just all of a sudden just drift on me and go a completely different direction to what I wanted. And it was really strange. And it did happen a few times, but compared to the number of hours I played, it wasn't very much. So what I did in the interest of testing was I actually connected the cable as I'm doing here. You can see it's a nice firm connection into that charge port. Really solid. That's not coming out once it's plugged in. But running this controller over USB and setting obviously that USB switch is essential on the bottom of the controller. I experienced a lot more odd behavior. And what was really strange was that over USB cable I expected to see a lot less odd behavior than I would over Bluetooth wireless connection, but I was actually seeing the reverse. The controller was giving me more instances of analog drift with the USB cable connected than it was without. Now initially I did have this connected to a USB 3.0 hub, so a sharing hub with 4 ports on it, and I thought, okay, maybe there's some kind of polling going on the USB hub that's causing, you know, these erratic behaviors. And one of the behaviors I was getting, by the way, was a disconnection of the controller, random disconnection for no reason. Obviously it's cabled, so it shouldn't be getting disconnected. Now I can confirm that that was due to the hub that I was using. The hub, after removing it from the configuration, if you like, I no longer got the disconnects. However, I still got the analog misbehavior where sometimes it would just erratically do its own thing with the analogs. So I fully recharged both of the controllers and went back into Bluetooth wireless mode for both controllers, 10 hours testing each. And I found that once the battery life started to go in these controllers, and only once the battery life started to go, that's when I started to see some weirdness on the analogs where they would kind of do their own thing or drift. The other issue I did see, which I'd be honest I'd not noticed before, was that when I was aiming down the sights on weapons in games like Apex or Call of Duty Black Ops, COD WW2, the aim would shake, but only when the hair triggers were enabled. So basically with the hair triggers enabled and the battery starts going low, you can get aiming issues where literally it's shaking down to 90 degrees sometimes. That said, obviously it's when the battery's running low, so you can kind of expect any controller, once its battery goes low, to give you some kind of strange characteristic. A typical example is generic Microsoft controller will lose its rumble, for instance, a good 30 minutes sometimes before the controller dies. You also generally lose audio over your jack, so if you're chatting to people, all of a sudden you can't chat anymore because the battery's running low. So you do always get some kind of symptom over a wireless controller when the battery's going. So that for me isn't too much of a concern. The weird thing is that the controller works better over Bluetooth and seems to work normally over Bluetooth until its batteries start going. The really odd thing though is that if you connect the USB cable, within 2 hours of playing with charged controllers, I actually got the analog drift again. And obviously the controller's charged, it's connected to a cable, so it shouldn't be losing any charge. And within a couple of hours it was giving me this odd analog behavior. Now it's not all the time, it's about 2 to 3% of the time this happens. It's very random, but obviously over a cable I do not expect the controller to behave adversely at all. And given that obviously this is a controller that's supposed to give the player a competitive edge, people are going to be using the cable if they're trying to be competitive, because you get more of an advantage from the cable. It's marginal, but it's there. And the reality is that most people buying this controller, if they're trying to be competitive, are going to use the cable. And over the cable, it's just not 100% reliable, unfortunately. It absolutely guts me to tell you that, because I really wanted this to be a great controller. Now, this leaves me in a difficult place for a review, because we've got a product that is very high quality from its design and the materials used and the packaging and stuff. It's got a really great app for configuring, the controller. It's very easy to use, very easy to install. It works great over Bluetooth. From my experience, both controllers worked fine until the battery started going low. But over a cable, where it should be 100% reliable, it isn't, and that is obviously a problem. So based on all of those pros and cons, I'm going to give the Razer Raiju a 7 out of 10. But do take into account what I've told you in this review. Me personally, paying for this controller, £150, with some strange behaviour over USB cable, kind of makes me think, well, is this thing going to get worse in time? The current firmware releases haven't fixed the issue, and I did do some research after seeing these problems myself, and there are a ton of people complaining about these problems, and I don't see any solutions as yet. So I personally am going to be returning my controller for credit and looking for something else. So, because I want something I can rely on, and this doesn't exactly fill me with confidence. I like the fact it works over Bluetooth, so if you only got an intention to use it Bluetooth wirelessly, it'll probably be fine for you. But over cable, if that's something that is a priority for you, then I would say, start looking at something else, unfortunately. So, sorry about that. I was really hoping this to be a positive review, just like probably most of you were, because I really wanted a good form factor controller for PS4, but I'm going to tell it how it is. And as I said, I did 100 hours of testing, and I was extremely thorough while doing this testing. And the problems I've seen are very definite. They exist. So I'll take this opportunity to thank you guys for watching the review. If you found it in any way helpful, or you liked the video, please be kind enough to maybe drop me a like or subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching. Take care and come back soon.